There is a weight you've been carrying for far too long, and in moments of weakness, confusion, and spiritual fatigue, you've reached out to voices that seemed kind, faces that smiled, and hearts that appeared to care. But deep beneath the surface of that borrowed comfort, there was an unseen war being waged against your destiny, a hidden resistance cloaked in counterfeit concern, and I, Archangel Michael, have been assigned to reveal the truth. Not every listening ear is a loyal soul. Not every comforting response is rooted in love. And not every friend who hears your pain has the spiritual integrity to handle it without secretly celebrating your struggles. For there are some who sit in silent satisfaction when you're low, who nod in fake compassion while their hearts quietly feed on your weakness, who speak words of support to your face, but carry words of destruction behind your back. And heaven has watched in silence as you, child of the Most High, unknowingly placed your pearls in the mouths of wolves, trusting hearts that never deserved access to your vulnerable truth. And while you were crying out for guidance, hoping someone would understand the storms raging inside you, these counterfeit connections were silently weaponizing your words, planting seeds of doubt and division, feeding your insecurities not to help you heal, but to keep you small, to anchor you in spiritual dependency, to limit your rise because your elevation threatens their own hidden pride. And I have been dispatched now to say, stop venting to those who are spiritually misaligned with your calling. Stop bleeding in the presence of those who are only loyal to your brokenness, but absent in your breakthrough. Because your voice is powerful, your journey is holy, and your vulnerability is sacred. It was never meant to be digested by hearts that secretly root against your deliverance. And while you thought they were allies, their spiritual vibration revealed to heaven something you have yet to see clearly. They smile in your presence but sigh at your victories. They say, I'm here for you, but vanish when you start shining too brightly. They offer advice not to lift you, but to trap you in cycles that keep you leaning on their approval instead of God's direction. And now is the time to sever the invisible cords that tie your healing to the opinions of those who are not assigned to it, to reclaim your story from the ears that distorted it, to retreat into the quiet chambers of divine intimacy where your tears are not gossip, but incense before the throne. And if it feels lonely for a while, know this. It is better to walk with angels in silence than with deceivers in conversation. And your healing will accelerate the moment you understand that not everyone deserves access to the process God is taking you through, because some are not just unqualified to hear your pain. They're spiritually allergic to your purpose. And every time you let them into your heart, you give them ammunition to curse what God is blessing. And so I say this with urgency. Heaven is not mad that you shared your burdens, but heaven is grieved that you did so with those who mock your faith in secret. And you are not wrong to seek comfort. You were simply misled by appearances, but the time for clarity is now. And you must step back, observe, and ask God to show you the true alignment of the people in your circle, not based on what they say when you cry, but how they act when you rise, because elevation reveals what struggle hides, and some of the voices you've trusted were only loyal to your storms, not your sunshine, and they cannot follow you into the next dimension of your purpose. You must understand now that the people who secretly root against you are not always loud, not always obvious, not always openly hostile, Sometimes they're the ones who check in just enough to stay informed, the ones who applaud your pain quietly and pretend to mourn with you so they can get closer to the fire they hope will burn you down. And heaven has watched with solemnity as these individuals lingered near your life, not to uplift you, but to monitor your movement, to gather pieces of your truth only to twist them later into quiet curses, planting spiritual interference through envy-laced intentions masked as support. And while you believe you were safe to open up, while you believe you had finally found someone who would carry your pain with reverence, they were secretly feeding on your struggle, storing your tears like currency for gossip, weighing your heartbreak in their private chambers, and weighing it against their own pride, hoping you would stay stuck in the place they secretly feel superior to. And I, Archangel Michael, am speaking with urgency not to shame you, but to wake you, to shake you into the awareness that not everyone you call friend is anointed for your calling, and not everyone you confide in is spiritually equipped to handle your burdens with integrity. And what you have been sensing, those subtle shifts, those moments when your spirit felt uneasy after confiding, that feeling of being spiritually drained after certain conversations, is not paranoia. It is divine discernment rising in you. Try to alert you that something is wrong, that some connections are not simply unhealthy, they are spiritually weaponized. And if you do not sever these channels, your growth will be stifled not by the enemy outside, but by the ones disguised as your counsel. For the enemy is clever and will often wear the face of a listener, a friend, even a mentor, just to gain access to the most fragile parts of your soul. And that access gives them entry, not only into your emotions, but into the manifestation of your blessings. And some of you are wondering why your elevation feels delayed, why your breakthroughs feel stuck in limbo, why your joy feels short-lived. And the reason is because you keep pouring divine oil into cups that leak, into hearts that drain you, into conversations that pollute your clarity. And if you do not close the door to these draining voices, you will continue to relive the same cycles, watching them smile in your face, while secretly holding back the applause every time God blesses you. And I am not telling you to become hardened. I'm telling you to become holy, set apart, wise, spiritually selective, because your next season requires tighter circles, sacred silence, and divine discretion. And the strength you're stepping into cannot afford to be wasted on people who clap louder at your suffering than at your survival. And God is not punishing you by removing certain voices. He's protecting your promise, because what He's about to place in your hands must be shielded from sabotage disguised as sympathy. And your destiny can no longer be diluted by the emotional manipulation of those who claim to love you, but celebrate your weakness in secret. And now is your moment to go quiet where you once spoke too freely, to guard your spirit where you once bled openly, and to understand that elevation requires insulation, that where God is taking you next, your voice must be poured out only in atmospheres that honor it, only into spirits that intercede, not intrude. And if it means walking alone for a season, let it be, because you're never truly alone when heaven surrounds you. And I, Michael, have been commanded to walk beside you in this pruning season, not as punishment, but as preparation, because the peace, clarity, and authority you've been praying for will rush in the moment you finally close your heart to the counterfeit comforters and open your mouth only to those assigned by heaven to carry your truth with holy fear. You have cried on shoulders that were never strong enough to hold the weight of your destiny, and you've spoken sacred things in spaces that never deserved to hear them. Not because you were naive or foolish, but because your heart was desperate for relief, for human warmth, for someone, anyone, to say, I understand, yet the truth you must now accept is this. Understanding does not always equal alignment, and alignment matters more than empathy when your purpose is under divine construction. Because while they were nodding and listening, some were secretly praying that you would not rise higher than them, that your healing would take longer than theirs, that your light would dim just enough to keep you dependent on their validation. And heaven has kept record of this, not to bring vengeance upon them, but to bring clarity to you, because it is not that they openly wish you harm, it is that they cannot spiritually survive your breakthrough. And so they disguise their spiritual insecurity as advice, as concern, as subtle redirection. But their words carry invisible chains. Their presence brings spiritual fog. And after every interaction with them, you feel emptier, more doubtful, and less sure of the vision God gave you in secret. And that is not a coincidence. That is spiritual sabotage through proximity. And I, Archangel Michael, have stood at the edge of your bed while you wept, watching invisible arrows of doubt penetrate your aura, not from demons in the dark, but from false confidence in the light. And now I tell you with divine certainty, the time for casual access to your anointing has ended. The time for oversharing out of desperation is over, because what's rising inside of you now is too sacred, too costly, too miraculous to be diluted by the opinions of people who celebrate your trauma more than your triumph. And yes, it will hurt to realize that some of the people you trusted most are not enemies in the flesh, but enemies in the spirit, because their hearts were never postured to support your becoming. They were attached to who you were before the healing began. And now that your healing threatens the dynamics they're comfortable with, they will do what all spiritually misaligned people do when they can no longer manipulate your pain. They will distance, withdraw, gossip, and twist the truth, not because you did wrong, but because your growth no longer needs their validation. And that threatens the fragile illusion of closeness they once controlled. And heaven wants you to see it clearly now. This is not rejection. It is redirection. This is not cruelty. It is cleansing. And you are not losing friends. You are being freed from hidden spiritual assignments sent to monitor, not minister. And while they once had access to your thoughts, to your fears, to your tears, now they must be met with silence. Not hatred, but holy silence. The kind that confuses darkness and protects your sacred rebirth. And I, Michael, who wars with the sword of divine truth, say this with absolute authority. Your voice is too powerful to be spilled into the wrong hands. Your insight too precious to be digested by those who chew on it with envy, and your story too holy to be dissected by those who are not assigned to witness your resurrection. Because what God is about to do in your life will confuse those who only knew you in your brokenness. It will offend those who benefited from your silence, and it will shock those who thought your vulnerability was their spiritual leverage. But it is not anymore, because now you know, and now you see, and now you rise. And from this moment forward, may your heart become a vault, your spirit a sanctuary, and your voice a trumpet only heaven can tune, because this is your consecration, And the next chapter of your life must be sealed from every watcher who cheered more for your wounds than for your healing. And now, child of light, heaven speaks its final warning with both compassion and fire. The version of you that survives silent betrayals, emotional manipulation, and counterfeit friendships is no longer allowed to keep pretending that your discernment is just anxiety, that your gut feeling is just insecurity, that your sudden discomfort around familiar people is just a phase. No, that is your spirit awakening, your angels alerting, your soul remembering who you truly are and what must be. Protected at all costs, and I, Archangel Michael, have stood between you and the shadows for years, deflecting what you didn't even know was spiritual warfare, not from demons with horns, but from mouths that smiled and eyes that secretly resented your resilience. And now the veil has been lifted because heaven is making room for miracles too holy to be handled by polluted atmospheres. And I must tell you this with urgency. If you do not stop sharing your heart with those who are secretly feeding off your struggle, you will delay the very breakthroughs your prayers have summoned, because the energy of their concealed envy clings to your words like smoke, wrapping around your dreams, clouding your clarity. And every time you open up in front of those misaligned souls, you trade revelation for validation and unknowingly give the enemy legal access to interfere with divine timing. But not anymore. Not now. Not in this hour. Because God is not just elevating you. He is sealing you, setting you apart, placing a heavenly guard over your spirit so that your wisdom is no longer wasted on those who cannot handle your calling. And though your heart may mourn the loss of those familiar voices, your soul will rejoice when you realize that their absence is not a wound, but a wall of protection. Because what's coming next requires intimacy with heaven, not dependency on broken humans who only love the version of you that needed rescuing. And make no mistake, you are no longer that version. You have outgrown the emotional scaffolding they provided, and now you are being rebuilt by God Himself, foundation to rooftop. And this new structure cannot support the weight of shallow alliances, of massed affection, of spiritual spectators clapping for your pain, while quietly hoping you never find the strength to fully rise. And so now you must step back, step up, and step forward with divine authority, guarding your truth like a treasure chest, offering your soul only to those who are divinely assigned to handle it with intercessory reverence. Because this next blessing you're stepping into is not just for you. It's generational, it's prophetic, it's explosive, and if shared in the wrong direction, it will attract spiritual vultures who come dressed as listeners. And I'm telling you this because the enemy knows your voice is about to be used to shift atmospheres, your story to break chains, your breakthrough to ignite faith in places you haven't even entered yet. And so, He will send distractions, familiar faces, old wounds disguised as new comforters. But you will not fall for it this time because you are wiser, sharper, covered, and armed with divine sight. And this part of your journey demands silence. Not secrecy born of fear, but silence forged in strength. The kind of silence that doesn't shrink but sanctifies. The kind that says, I don't need to explain what God is doing in me, because in time, the fruit will speak louder than my words. And I, Michael, will walk beside you as you navigate this pruning, this sacred shift, because it is not rejection, it is redirection, It is not isolation, it is consecration. And when the dust settles and the blessings arrive, you will finally understand that losing their false loyalty was the price for gaining heaven's full endorsement. And you will never again apologize for being careful with your peace, your voice, your vulnerability. Because now you know the truth. Not everyone who listens loves you, not. Everyone who agrees supports you. And not everyone who claps wants you to win. But heaven does, I do, and your Father does. And that is more than enough to carry you into every promise that was written for you long before their approval was ever mistaken for alignment.